Thanks for listening to Uncle Sam's Soccer Podcast, keeping you up to date with the latest in American soccer. And don't forget to subscribe.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Uncle Sam's Soccer Podcast. My name's Steven Jodarand.
And I'm Jake Watroba.
And on today's episode, we try to get back into normality. We talk about sports. Yes, we got Eric Gomez, who covers LigaMX and MLS for ESPN on our show, to talk about LigaMX and MLS. Now, listeners, if you haven't done so, hit that subscribe button, leave us a 5-star review, and send in your thoughts and questions at Uncle Sam's Soccer Pod or Uncle Sam's Soccer Podcast at gmail.com. We want to build a community during these unprecedented times, so talk to us. We're here for you. Now, let's get to today's episode.
Alrighty, Steven. Have you heard the big news?
Yeah, this morning, Tom Brady ain't going back to the Patriots.
No, that's not the big news. That's not the big news.
Well,
we were featured on an article on MLSsoccer.com, basically laying out all the MLS podcasts that are out there, that are available for you guys, the listeners, to consume. And we just wanted to take the time to thank you, first of all, for listening, and two, listening and building this community with us, having these conversations with us, sending in your questions, your thoughts on Twitter or on email or Instagram or TikTok when we were trying to do that for a little bit. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day, for just consuming our content, listening to our show, giving us feedback. We appreciate it. If you mentioned us to MLSsoccer.com, I'm not sure if they were running something to like, hey, what's your favorite podcast? If you did that, if you passed along and said, hey, Uncle Sam's Soccer Podcast, it's a good podcast, listen to it. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you,
a million listeners. We wouldn't do this without you. That said, as I just mentioned, we are a community. This is an unprecedented time for really the world, as we are all pretty much self-quarantining, social distancing. So that said, we want to check in on you guys. We want to build a community. So you want to talk about sports, you want to talk about life, at Uncle Sam's Soccer Pod, we are here for you. Jake and I will do our best to extend our metaphoric hand to you. Because, you can't touch each other right now because that would be a violation of social distancing. Anyway, Jake, let's talk about some sports. It's been a hectic week shutting down, but one league hasn't shut down, and that's the NFL. And boy, news have been rolling in left and right. And this is something that I wanted to talk about more on a later episode. In fact, the episode that comes out after this, we'll do a little bit more on this. But your initial thoughts on the NFL and free agency, and should they be continuing like this in these unprecedented times?
Yeah, they should be, because here's the thing. Everybody has tape on everybody. You don't need to be having workouts or meetings or what you can have a meeting on Skype. You can do what you and I are doing right now. You can discuss, you can have an interview or a conversation with a potential player. You have all the footage, you have all the tapes, you have all the medical documents you need to make a decision on if player X will fit in your system. I think what the NFL has done, and I think they may have gotten some flack for it initially for not pushing back free agency because of what's going on in the world today. I think what it has done is, for the people like you and I who, like sports in general. I mean, you and I both consume the NFL outside of soccer.
Absolutely.
It has given us something to talk about. It has given us something to follow. It's like a reprieve. Is that the word I'm looking for? From what's just going on. It's just it's nice to just hear like, oh hey, Tom Brady's leaving. Like that's sports
news.
That's different. That's
It's
different than what we've heard
sports.
from the last week.
Yeah,
it's not all doom and gloom.
Right,
unless
right.
you're a Patriots fan.
Well, yeah, different story. But yeah, and the reason why I'm bringing this up, and this is something we'll definitely get more into, like I said, on the next episode, but there's a lot of crisscross between the NFL and MLS. What did the NFL just pass in the new CBA? What playoff format does that look like, Jake? That playoff format, I've seen that before. I've seen it tried. Where's that playoff format that the new NFL CBA is talking about? Where have we seen that?
I think you've seen that in MLS. I think you
Oh,
saw it last
MLS.
Year.
Wow. There is a connection between both leagues, okay? And it's very important to see what the owners of the NFL, as obviously there are a few who are owners of an MLS team, is to see how they are interacting and how they are conducting their business. Because you don't think that bleeds over into what MLS is wanting to do and into their reaction to all this? It most definitely does, and it's worthwhile paying attention to seeing what the NFL does. Now, let's get to Eric Gomez.
Joining us now on the show, he covers LigaMX and MLS for ESPN FC and ESPN Deportes. You can follow him on Twitter at Eric Gomez89. It is Eric Gomez. Eric, how are you doing?
Doing good. Doing the self-quarantine that most of us, if not all of us, should be doing at this point, but it's going well.
Yeah, you're coming. We're calling you actually. Obviously, we're in the United States, but you're in Mexico City. So just briefly, I'm just curious. Talk a little bit about what the situation is like in Mexico City and what the authorities are doing or aren't doing.
Yeah, as far as what the authorities are doing right now, I mean, all the mass events have been postponed, suspended. So, last Sunday was our last taste of LigaMX, and even that was done without crowds. For the foreseeable future, we don't have any large-scale public events, as is the case around the world right now, most of the world really. And as far as what they're not doing, I mean, as I mentioned, I'm self-quarantining. We're not in a stage yet here in Mexico in which the government is actively intervening and asking people to stay home from work and school and all that. There are a few closures as far as schools and private institutions, but it's definitely not across the board. I went out a couple of days ago and did some grocery shopping to hunker down, and there was still a lot of people out there in the streets. I can see from my third-story apartment window down onto the street that there's still plenty of pedestrians and cars going by. So we still have a lot of work to do as far as mandating that people stay home and get through this.
Eric, when you went out, were you able to find toilet paper? Because that's been a big issue for us up here, is we can't find toilet paper anywhere.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. That's kind of spreading around the world as far as what people are hoarding. I'm a Costco guy, so I luckily stocked up on toilet paper a few weeks ago, so I didn't need to buy it. But I will say I was. Like I said, I was at Costco a couple of days ago doing some shopping, and people were making runs at the moist towelettes, the antibacterial soap, and the hand sanitizer and all that. So it's the same kind of panic, no matter where you are.
Yeah. Wow. Anyway, let's talk about sports. Let's talk about something that we enjoy and do, and the world has come to a complete pause. But as you mentioned, LigaMX still had matches this last weekend, and Why such a slow reaction when the world has literally, in a span of, 36 hours, major sports leagues across the globe had just said we're shutting down for the foreseeable future, most of them citing anywhere between 2 to 6 weeks?
Yeah, I think the answer might be insensitive to those people that I know within the LigaMX offices, but I think it's pretty obvious, and the answer is money. They didn't want to give up their position there as far as attracting people to the stadiums. I mean, last Friday in Tijuana, and I believe Puebla was the last two games with crowds, with people in attendance. So it was very late as far as reacting to what the rest of the world was doing on that front. And then within the span of 24, 48 hours, they just completely shut down the league. They went from having people in stadiums to holding the last days of games without people in the stadium, and then finally shutting the entire thing down. So there was some pressure there from CONCACAF and from FIFA, I found out. I understand that FIFA in general, they're pushing for leagues around the world, especially those countries that have reported cases of the coronavirus, to stop play entirely. And I know that pretty much 90 to 95% of those countries have done so. There's still a couple of holdouts there, but at the end of the day, Mexico, LigaMX, they were concerned about giving up short-term economic gain, and they tried their darndest to keep it going. When they saw that it just wasn't a good idea to have people in stadiums or even to have the players exposed to this, then they decided to stop altogether. But I know that that was not their original plan, even Saturday afternoon, Saturday night.
Eric, do we have an idea of what the financial ramifications are for LigaMX with this stoppage?
Well, I mean, I have no idea how these contracts are legislated as far as insurance with the TV networks that pay them rights fees and all that. You know, they might have different provisions with not just broadcasters in Mexico, but in the United States and beyond, that allow them to keep making money even if the games are stopped. But that would certainly be a big concern. I mean, as far as attendance, that will impact every team differently based on their stadium size and how much they charge. And, you know, the other part of this is pretty, I would say, is much more important than the other two things that so far, and that is the employees for each team, people who work in stadiums, and for the organizations that are not players, that are not making a significant amount of money. You want to make sure that you take care of them. And, you know, that's certainly been a concern across the United States as far as the sports leagues that have been impacted, and the NBA, MLB, certainly NCAA, as far as the employees. I don't know how people in Mexico are managing, but I would hope that something similar is being done to protect them and protect the families, the players, the owners. They'll be fine. But, you know, there are all these other vulnerable people out there that might be much more affected.
What about the fan reaction? Obviously, here in the States, worldwide, in Europe, shutting down the games was somewhat of a thing. We were just waiting for it to happen. Obviously, in Europe, they were playing games already behind closed doors. Serie A had already postponed matches in the last several weeks. But what about in Mexico after the news broke that, you know, okay, we're going to join the rest of the sporting landscape worldwide is to put the whole league on the pause? What did the fans have to say to that?
So as far as fan reaction, I think people are pretty split. A lot of people in Mexico still don't think that this is a big deal, whereas a lot of people who go to the stadium regularly were planning to stay away as late as last week. So obviously, when you've got these exponential numbers and cases growing day by day, Mexico is about, I'd say, 2 weeks behind Spain and Italy, which is pretty frightening as far as the amount of people that have been infected and confirmed cases and all that. So I think people are pretty much bracing for the worst here in Mexico. And at the end of the day, it's just a smart move to say we're going to stop it right here and encourage people to stay home and try to ride this thing out.
Well, Eric, let's talk actually about soccer instead of the coronavirus and things being shut down. I want to know your reaction, or what the fans' reaction was to Lyon blowing that first Champions League or CONCACAF Champions League fixture against LAFC. What was the reaction in Mexico like to that?
So I'll preface this by saying that anytime you've got the best player on the field, you have a chance. They have not just the best player in that Leon LAFC series and Carlos Vela, but they have the best player in the tournament. And they played a fantastic second leg. I think that's not up for debate. one of the things that I was most interested by when watching that game was how Leon's manager, Nacho Ambriz, guy that has coached in Spain as an assistant for Javier Aguirre, a guy that has coached Club America, one of the biggest teams in the continent, how he would respond to the pressure of that second leg and holding that lead, because in the past he's been labeled as being a very conservative coach. And I think that happened again with him. Those old ghosts kind of came back to haunt him, and to sort of maybe assimilate this to a different sport. You could make a case and make a comparison with Nacho Ambriz to what happened to Kyle Shanahan, right? With Atlanta and San Francisco and the Super Bowl. He's a guy that is not to be trusted with a big lead most of the time. And that really came back to haunt him again. Leon was far too conservative in that second leg. They've got one of the best offenses, in CONCACAF. Angel Mena and Meneses and all of these other great players that they've signed over the last couple of years, kind of coalescing into this fantastic offensive unit. And they just were completely idle during that second leg against LAFC. They were outplayed, and you would think that you would want to use LAFC's aggressiveness against them by counterattacking, but they weren't even able to do that. Their attacks were just cut off at midfield. It was pretty sad to watch if you were a Leon fan. But again, it was to be expected from a guy like Nacho Ambriz, who hopefully for Leon fans will learn the lesson this time and adjust the next time he's in a position that was similar to that one.
Let me get your reaction to Club America beating Atlanta United. They scored 2 goals in a span of 2 minutes in the opening 13 minutes. Did Atlanta, obviously they had a massive injury in Martinez just several weeks ago, so against Nashville in the league opener. Did Atlanta really have a shot without Martinez? And what was the reaction to the 3-0 scoreline?
I think they did have a chance because Club America is going through this very difficult period as far as injuries. We'll see what happens whenever this series is resumed as far as who they get back. But they have 5-6 first-choice players, first-team players sidelined. And they've got them sidelined for a variety of reasons. Some of those injuries are short-term. Some of those injuries are long-term. And they've also got a player that was pretty much able to their starting trouble and now not with the team. That was ongoing. So there were plenty of things that Atlanta, I believe, could have taken advantage of during that first match, and they were just completely outplayed. I don't think that this is going to shock anybody. I don't think that this is necessarily a secret. But I think any league team backs up favorably with their offense against any MLS team's defensive unit. And I think with Atlanta, it was not just an issue of not having Joseph Martinez, because at least when you've got Martinez's speed, you can expect any team to be careful against the counterattack, right? Especially finishing those passes from Beatty and from Barco. Mm-hmm. But now that Martinez is a non-factor because he's injured, that's not as big of a fear with other guys. So their reaction was great. They to go in and leg and basically.
The postponement of the CCL, is that that has to be the worst possible outcome for Cruz Azul, right? They had to have been the favorites. As of last week, with the form they were in LigaMX.
Yeah, that's really interesting because you mentioned it. I mean, they've got fantastic momentum, or they had fantastic momentum going into that series with LAFC. And it goes back to what I was saying beforehand in reference to that Leon series. Momentum comes and goes, right?
Right.
Who knows what this Cruz Azul team is going to look like a month, however long it takes to come back. They're still going to have that same roster of players. They're still going to have that same quality, but that momentum and that that great run of play that they've had over the last 6 weeks might be wiped out. Now, on the other hand, LAFC, and anytime, as I said before, best player in the series, best player on the pitch, you have a puncher's chance. So I think LAFC, as far as a very non-important scale, I think the play is going to be the most beneficial to LAFC when all is said and done. Whether they take advantage of that when we come back remains to be seen, obviously. But it comes out, they're a little bit rusty.
Yeah, this is going to be rather fascinating. Have you heard any rumors, any news regarding what CONCACAF plans to do with the Champions League in UEFA? They're looking at doing something rather unprecedented in the sense that they would do some sort of March Madness semi-final in one city with the final the weekend after, kind of what they did with the Nations League. Now, again, this is just rumors. This is floating out there. But what has CONCACAF, have you had any contact with anybody in contact with CONCACAF and what they plan on doing with the Champions League?
No, I haven't had any direct contact with CONCACAF, but I do know that considering the petitions that UEFA and CONMEBOL have, and the contact that they've had with FIFA as far as pushing the national team tournaments back into 2021, struggle to find a new spot in the calendar for the new Club World Cup, right? Which obviously affects the outcome of these club Champions Leagues around the world. So I think that they're going to finish the tournament. No, I don't know when that's going to happen. We've had a situation in which that is condensed, so it's just kind of rapid fire as we go. It may stretch into the second half of 2020 because we don't have to worry about Champions League going through that European calendar model that we had previously. We can sort of sit back and let the Nations League and the CONCACAF League, which is the club competition that allows the Caribbean American qualify for 2021.
Eric, I wanted to ask you one last question before we let you go. Rafael Marquez was quoted about 2 weeks ago as saying that LigaMX should be worried and that it won't be long before MLS overtakes us. Is that a growing sentiment in Mexico right now? We hear it a lot up here about, is MLS closing the gap? Do people in Mexico think that is happening right now?
That is absolutely a valid talking point. Anytime we get around to the CONCACAF League, the Campeones Cup, the revamped, I'm forgetting the name of this new tournament with the 16 teams.
The Leagues Cup.
The Super League. There you go, the Leagues Cup. People in the media, you're worrying about whether MLS is closing the gap.
Let the listeners know where they can find your information, find your awesome content, and anything else you'd like to plug for the last 30 seconds here.
Yeah, so when MLS comes back, if any of you out there are listening, read Spanish, I do an MLS column every Sunday night. That's up on ESPN Deportes.com. I write about LigaMX and MLS and also sports in Mexico for ESPN.com. And as the guys mentioned at the top of this, my Twitter handle is @EricGomez86. Lots of spicy banter there, so absolutely involved and let's chat.
Great, awesome. Really appreciate it. Thanks, Eric.
Hey, thanks, guys. No problem. Anytime.
A massive shout out and big thank you to Eric Gomez and listeners. We do apologize for the connection issue there. We did our best to resolve it. But Jake, fascinating stuff. I'm not too sure what CONCACAF is going to do with the Champions League. I think UEFA is a little bit more pressed, as Eric alluded to there. It'll be fascinating. I wonder if they do some sort of reformatting. We hear that UEFA is going to reformat into some sort of similar March Madness Final Four where you have one city hosting 3 games in the span of 10 days, which would be really cool, would be really interesting, but it would be definitely different than what we're used to in UEFA standards. But with CONCACAF Champions League, it seems like they have more flexibility.
Here's my suggestion: knockout style tournament, 1-game knockout in Dallas, and that's how you do it. You just
final at Jerry's World.
Well, no, you just forget the first leg of these last games.
So you give Atlanta a chance to redo themselves.
Mulligan, they all get mulligans. Everyone gets a mulligan.
Do you think the Mexican sides are going to be happy with that? And
I think CONCACAF would be happy with that because they're going to make a ton of money off of it, or they're going to be able to make money off of it.
Fair, yeah, but I guess it depends with the flexibility. So
yeah, that's why you do a 1-game knockout. You just do it Tuesday, Thursday.
Yeah, but it also
Tuesday,
depends.
Wednesday, Thursday at Jerry's World.
The problem is we're speculating. We have no idea when they're coming back. For all we know, it could be in 6 weeks. It could be in 12 weeks. And that's right. The problem, right? Anyway, listeners, at Uncle Sam Soccer Pod, at Jake Watroba, at Steven Jodder, a big shout out to our guest Eric Gomez. Go give him a follow at Eric Gomez 86. We'll be back tomorrow with more sports coverage. Like I said, we want to build a community, so send in your thoughts. What's on your mind? We have this metaphoric hand stretching out. We want to help. Until next time.